The National Association of Realtors said last week that prices of existing homes soared a record 17% from March 2020 to March 2021, a clear sign that the housing market is out of control. It even seems like it's about to get worse than the 2008 crash. The last time something like that happened was between 2005 and 2007, and we know perfectly what happened next. The US economy collapsed and took down with it the entire global economy. But it seems different this time. Unlike the 2008 crash, banks are not lending mortgages to random people with poor credit scores, but rather to those who definitely can afford it. They are the most trustworthy creditors of all time. So let's try to understand what's going on in the housing market. Is the housing market about to crash? And if so, then when that crash is going to happen? Give this video a thumbs up and let's get right into it. To understand what's happening to the housing market, we have to understand what caused prices to rise in the first place. House prices usually rise by 2 or 3% at best. They don't suddenly out of nowhere rise by 17%. That's something unheard in real estate market. Way before the pandemic, the economy was already showing signs of declining after having its longest expansion in the US history. For 10 years, the economy grew, which was something totally unheard in the entire history of the United States. But whatever rises eventually falls, and the economy is no different. The economy follows a certain cycle. It starts with expansion, and once it reaches the peak, it starts to slow down and then falls into a recession. If that recession lasts too long, it could turn into a depression. Once it reaches its bottom line, it starts growing again, and the same cycle repeats over and over. Around 2018 and 19, the economy reached its fullest potential and was on the brink of falling into a recession. And the pandemic was that final punch that sent the economy into a recession. In order to make a recession a little less painful, the Fed intervened by lowering interest rates to stimulate growth and printing money. Before the pandemic, interest rates were above 3%, which meant that it was pretty expensive to buy a house. But right after when the pandemic started, the Fed lowered interest rates to 0 to 0.25%, which meant borrowing money became extremely cheap or almost free. That pushed a lot of people to buy houses, even if they weren't planning to do so, which drove the price higher and higher. And even until today, interest rates are still around 0.25%, and mortgage rates are much lower than they were before the pandemic. 1 or 2% difference might not seem like a lot, but let's take a practical example of how much of a difference even 1% makes. Let's say you want to buy a house that costs $300,000 and your mortgage, instead of 4%, is going to be 3%. Assuming you're going to make a down payment of 20%, you are going to save an additional $134 per month. At first glance, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but if you give it a second thought, that's a huge difference. That's an extra $1,600 a year, or $48,000 over the course of your mortgage. For some people, that's how much money they make in an entire year. If you can get a 1% lower rate, you can save yourself a year of work. But here is where the interesting part starts. If we count the opportunity cost of that money, that number skyrockets. Instead of saving it, let's say you are going to invest that money into the S&P 500 every year. Over 30 years, you are going to end up with $300,000. Literally the price of your house. 1% lower rate equals to an additional $300,000 worth of stocks at the end of your mortgage. I think that's something worth considering. That's why when the Fed lowered interest rates, the demand for houses grew exponentially, which drove the house prices higher and higher. But that's not the only reason why house prices are rising. Since the beginning of COVID, the number of houses in the market plummeted dramatically for various reasons. Take a look at this graph. It illustrates the number of houses in the market. These houses didn't just disappear. They weren't destroyed by a hurricane or a tornado, but rather people refused to sell. And what happens when the supply is dropping while demand is growing? Prices rise, which pushed more people to hold on and wait till prices reach the peak before they sell, which drove the prices higher and higher. That's how home prices grew by 17% in under a year. This means that if most of these people suddenly list their houses on the market, the oversupply will drive prices down, which could push more people to sell, which will drive the prices further down. It's a never-ending cycle. That's exactly what happened in 2008. People kept selling till the prices dropped to the rock bottom. Some analysts are predicting that the housing market is precisely what it was in 2005. It might not collapse this year, but this dramatic rise in home prices is definitely unsustainable. The housing market isn't like crypto or even stocks. Prices don't soar overnight or drop by 20% the next day. It's one of the oldest industries in history, so it grows or falls by a few percent at best. But when it turns into a bubble, it might take years for it to burst. On the other side, there are reasons why the crash, even if it happens, it is not going to happen anytime soon, and the market would witness a correction at best. First of all, the last housing crash was not that long ago, and the Fed learned its lessons, so it's carefully managing it so that nothing like that happens anytime soon. Secondly, the foundation of this housing market looks far more stable than those of 15 years ago. The supply of homes for sale has fallen to all-time lows, and borrowers are much more creditworthy than ever. The market is heavily regulated. No one who can't make their mortgage payments was given a loan. The vast majority of these borrowers are creditworthy. Of course, there will be people who will default on their loans for various reasons, including the fact that some people have lost their jobs for good, but they are a small minority and wouldn't have any significant influence over the market. Since the 2008 crash, developers built just enough homes to meet the demand. That's why home prices since 2010 have been growing, because there has always been a little shortage of homes to keep the market growing gradually. And if more homes are required, developers can quickly meet that demand. Everyone is expecting the Fed to raise rates, since keeping interest rates close to 0% will create inflation. However, based on what the chairman of the Fed said, it seems like the Fed is not planning to raise rates anytime soon, at least not this year. Maybe if we reach herd immunity, that could be the case. But judging by previous experience, after the 2008 crash, the Fed kept interest rates at around 0.25% for 7 years, until 2016. So it's very likely that interest rates will stay low for the next few years, which means the market is not going to collapse, since low mortgage rates will keep the demand for houses strong enough until the market stabilizes. We also have to consider demographic trends. They are creating new buyers. There is strong demand for homes on many fronts. Many Americans who already owned homes decided during the pandemic that they needed a bigger place. Millennials are a huge group and in their prime buying years. So let's draw some conclusions. Will the housing market crash? Theoretically, yes. There are enough reasons for the market to witness at least a correction. Is it going to happen anytime soon this year? Probably not, as long as the Fed keeps rates low enough. But this is all speculation because no one knows the future. We can only look at the factors that are causing prices to rise and learn from past experiences. However, every crash or every crisis is unique, and we do not have a perfect recipe for predicting them all. If you have enjoyed this video, you will most definitely enjoy this custom playlist that I have created specifically for you that has our most popular videos on investing, business, and money that could potentially change your life. And now, give this video a thumbs up that it deserves, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Thanks for watching, and until next time.